And joining me today is Leona Finchang, also of The Basement. And joining us from Europe is Lyndon LaRouche. So we'll get started with Leona.
I want to point out right at the beginning, and I want to highlight actually, an event that just happened over the weekend. And it happened in Frankfurt, Germany, although it encompassed a large part of the world, actually all of the world. And it was a conference that occurred called Attaining Freedom Through Necessity, The Last Chance for Humanity. And it is the fourth in a series of conferences along the theme of building a new paradigm for humanity, held by the Schiller Institute. And the last one was in the DC area. They had one before in New York and one prior in Germany as well. And it's very important because it actualizes something that we've been discussing a lot and we've been fighting for, which is this idea of a new paradigm. And for the people who participate, as well as for viewers here who will watch the proceedings, you will get a sense of living in an actual new paradigm, the one that we are fighting for. What I want to go through is some of the proceedings, just what was covered, to get you a sense of the scope of this idea. And so they had a panel on the strategic defense of Earth idea, which we've discussed here in this forum, an international collaboration around technology, around basic science, but also around the common aims of mankind. There was a presentation by Jason Ross, by Bruce Fine, by an asteroid Benediktov, and you'll see some of these presentations on the Schiller Institute website. Following that was an afternoon presentation on nuclear power, and there was two nuclear physicists, a nuclear engineer, going through the necessity, and very, very much the completely long overdue necessity of nuclear power. And I don't know, because I wasn't there, whether they discussed some of these other aspects of a nuclear society, which we've mentioned before, but not just nuclear power, but the entire isotope economy, the entire economy where we have control over the isotopic degrees of freedom and also the radiative degrees of freedom, and all the implications for life.
Right. So really it becomes looking at the idea of a nuclear platform, where we're now operating the entire economy based off of our willful control of things at the scale of the atomic nucleus.
Right, and it's the scale that life acts by. Following that, they had a classical concert, where they performed the Requiem, Mass in D minor, of Mozart, and actually I think they had it in memory of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose death was an anniversary of his death on the day before the conference. As followed also by the concert, was called a Musikabend, an evening of music in the Verdi tuning, the natural tuning of A432. And they had several demonstrations of this by singers, very good singers from all over. It was followed by people from all over: Japan, France, China, Ukraine, Russia, United States, Sweden, on the idea of Eurasian cooperation. And this covered large aspects, obviously the whole economic crisis, as well as what are the the principled ideas that we would integrate around, that we would start to collaborate around. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to have lasting peace, basically? There's a panel called "Is There Life After the Euro?" And
good question.
Right. Which I think that's self-explanatory. And then a panel on the subject of a classical renaissance. The necessity of having a classical culture as an integrated part of having a economic revival. That those two are not separate, nor is a scientific revival separate from those, either of those. So not only, I want to point out not only just the scope is amazing, and it really is, it's not just, it really is a demonstration. It's not just a good conference that people go to and have a nice weekend at. Mm-hmm. It really is a sense of a future. And you live in this future for maybe only a weekend, but it lives on. And people are going to come out of this conference and see the contrast. The contrast of what is considered reality today. Actually, I want to bring in a voice that we've heard before, Kraft Erica, on a similar subject, and sort of bring his voice into the conference as well.
A space pioneer, right?
Right. He was a space pioneer. We've mentioned him before, but he worked along with some of the first space pioneers and brought space technology into the United States and conceived the Atlas rocket, and so on. He has a paper called Lunar Industrialization and Settlement, the Birth of Polyglobal Civilization, a polyglobal civilization. And he goes through the steps of how to colonize the moon, colonize space, using the moon as one of the industrial bases. And in here he says, after going through some of the specifics, he says, the most important aspect of lunar development lies in the human sector. It bears repeating that technological progress and environmental expansion are no substitutes for human growth and maturity, but they can help the human reach higher maturity and wisdom. Human growth is contingent not only on the absence of war or overcoming hunger, poverty, and social injustice, but also on the presence of overarching, elevating goals and their associated perspectives. Expanding into space needs to be understood and approached as world development, as a positive, peaceful, growth-oriented, macro-sociological project whose goal is to ultimately release humanity from its present parasitic embryonic bondage in the biospheric womb of one planet. This will demand immense human creativity, courage, and maturity. But the human is the violent product of violent evolution on a violent planet in a violent universe. As he enters space, he carries the tensions of our time. If the human is to outgrow this terrible heritage and grow into this expanding world, a few limited activities in near-Earth orbit and limited scientific expeditions are not enough. Really great tasks that penetrate man's social structure, infuse a broad evolutionary perspective, tax his creativity, and challenge his mind are needed. The industrial development of the lunar world toward the first polyglobal civilization is one such task, indeed the first logical goal in the agenda of the extraterrestrial imperative. So in this aside, or maybe the point of this, He says, look, it's not, yes, I speak of industrialization, of the moon, of different places, but really that's not the ultimate goal. That's not the goal. Once you achieve it, then you can't say, well, now I'm done. But it's that process. It's this taxing our creativity and that process of growth that you're seeking for. And I think it's important to make clear that this idea of a new paradigm really isn't just a new state which is better, but it is a completely different outlook.
It's a different process.
It's a completely different process of evolution. And then one more voice I'll bring in is expanding from that idea that Kraft poses, the idea that Vernadsky contributes as well, which is that we as human beings are both integrated into all of the cosmos, and there's examples he poses which are just fun, which are, for example, that we should look for fragments of the Earth on the moon, because one, it might be preserved from 500 million years ago when which parts of the Earth that are that old would completely have been transformed by now, but might be preserved now on the moon. But it's a good example of how he thinks about how, in his development of this idea that we have a completely integrated solar system and cosmos, and that human beings in that context have this responsibility to be a citizen of the cosmos. And I think that would be one of the first launching points of a goal for a new paradigm. And I think for people who both have gone to the conference, are now going to watch this conference, have been in some of the discussions with us, with the Schiller Institute and so on, you will see that the contrast is so great between what seems like an easy goal in the sense of making complete sense of what humankind should do, and what is occurring right now as what seems like an inevitable push, what seems to be the direction of push towards complete disintegration, of the collapse of the euro, of what you've seen with Cyprus, with suicides, terrorist attacks, bombing. It seems like a completely ugly world. And that stark contrast, I think, poses the tension for our activity today.
So I'm not optimistic about continuing the way we're going at this. It's certainly what you've covered today so far is highly relevant. It's an aspect of the thing that has to be taken as one sort of phase approach to this thing. The question of what is the significance of Mars for us, I have a number of ideas which what that means. I think man has got to identify himself as dealing with Mars. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be there, but it means we're going to integrate our relationship with the solar system with what our relationship to Mars is. Obviously, if we eliminate the idea of putting mankind on Mars in the visible future, there are a lot of reasons for putting a lot of projects up there. That comes back to what you've just been going through. A lot of objects up there to be put up there on Mars. And these things will be guides to us and assistance to us in dealing with how the solar system is going to function. So these are the kinds of things I think we have to also deal with. We have to have a overall coherent system. What is the solar system? What is the part of the solar system which we have more immediate access to now? These are the kinds of questions that we have to build in, take the complementary relationship between when we look at parts and how the parts work together, and on the other hand, we have to look at the process in a completely different set of terms. The very issue of the defense of Earth, the defense of mankind on Earth, is a very specific question. So we could take the whole area and say the defense of human life within, say, the effects in the lower part of the solar system, and look at those factors as factors of which we have to exert control, or develop the ability to exert control. So I think we have the two aspects. One, I think you've covered rather aptly so far in reporting on these conditions. We have to look at all these components and pieces and see how they interact. We also have to look at the solar system as a whole, as a continued process, not a collection of interacting parts. And that's where the latter case is what I'm getting fretful right now. Fun. These things are fun. They're teasers, but I think they're the kinds of teasers which lead thoughtful people into deeper philosophical consideration of the kinds of problems that we do face.
Yeah.
And it's when we tickle our mental faculties to force us to begin to look at, instead of looking at the solar system from the standpoint of sense perception of what happened on Earth or so forth, let's take a look at the other view. Now, we know that there are creative processes in the universe which cannot be described by the simple way we describe any processes. But that's just the fun of it.
Right.
Let's get in and realize that there are larger principles which mankind has generally not even touched, but we know they exist. We know that mankind's sense perception does not determine the laws of the universe. We use sense perception as a useful tool, but it's only an approximation. What really drives the universe? At what point does mankind, by mankind's willful action, intervene and change the behavior of the universe beyond the scope of man on Earth?
So, with that, I think we will say goodbye for now, and we'll see everyone again next week.
Have fun.
All right.